on weekends, and then I'd get to see one, and then I'd go back. So anyway, we got married.
Do you remember when you got married?
Yeah, August the 2nd. And 62 years ago.
And Wanda, is your family a Chandler family or Tempe family or Chandler? Okay, so Chandler family.
That was funny. We got downtown Chandler. You know where Sabas is?
Yes.
Down about, block and a half from there was a little old Baptist church down there. And that's where we didn't know who they were there, but it was a good place to get married. So we went down, and this Baptist preacher married us. So we were married for what, 2 or 3 months, and we got a letter stating we had to come back and see him. And we came back down there, and she said, "Oh, you guys are not legally married." I said, "What do you mean?" Well, we had in Texas he was from, and he didn't have a witness. So we have to do it again, and he said, "Well, this is your chance. You can back out now if you want to." And I said, "No." So anyway, we got married twice.
Well, now you know you're married for sure. Did it 2
I
times.
was afraid so.
I'm going to ask you just like a couple more questions, and then we're going to go to your fire department experience.
Oh, okay.
I want you to think back about your experience during World War II, and this is a question that I've asked everybody that I've interviewed. Do you feel like your service in World War II affected the rest of your life?
Yeah, it made me grow up, for one thing. And so, being 17 years old and just a punk kid, I was always the youngest guy aboard ship, and I was always in fights because they'd pick on the young guy, and so I grew up to be a man when I was in there. So that it did, and a lot of memories.
Okay. What do you think are maybe some lessons that you learned from this time in your life?
Was what?
What do you think you had any lessons that you learned from being in World War II?
Well, the main thing I learned is don't go back to fighting in the war, for one thing. No, nothing there. I don't know of anything.
Okay. Now, so I want to go back then, and you married Wanda back in August of 1946, and then you guys lived in Chandler. Is that
Yeah.
where you stayed?
Mm-hmm.
And what happened after you came back and you got married? What did you do?
Then after we got married, well, I worked, like when I was telling you, when they built that, old man Shelley built that one end on Galveston Street, and on where Corley lives on, I don't remember which one it is, there's 3 or 4 streets down through there. Anyway, I got a job with there, and that's worked there for a while, and the guy, he was a plumber, and he liked me for some reason, so he said he wanted to teach me to be a plumber. What the heck, I wasn't doing anything, so I said, okay. So I did that for a long time. And then I got tired, I couldn't see nothing ahead for that. And so I had a friend that worked at Allied Signal, at Honeywell or whatever you want to call it. And he tried to get me to go over there, and I said, well, I don't want to go over there. And then, but finally I did, and I worked there then for 33 years.
So that was called Air Research when you first started there?
Air Research, and then Allied Signal. What happened was Air Research was Old Man Garrett, we call him the Old Man Garrett, started the thing before the war, and he made parts and stuff for airplanes. And then there was a Japanese firm that came in and wanted to buy us out, and he didn't want to sell it to them, so the guy that was CEO of Allied, or Signal Oil Company, the two of them got together, and Signal Oil bought us out. So then we were Allied Signal. And then Honeywell was up for sale, or they wanted to buy us, and then So we ended up buying Honeywell. And rather than keep it as Allied or Honeywell, well, then as Air Research or Allied Signal, they decided to call it because that wasn't well known like Honeywell was, so it'd been around for 100 years, so that's what they named it, Honeywell, and it's been that for years.
And you started working at Air Research in 1951, is that
Yeah,
correct?
yeah.
And what was your job when you started working
When
there?
I worked there was a pipe fitter. Then after a couple of years or so, they had the first line supervisors. One came open and they called them lead men. And so I put in for it and I got that. And then I had, I think about 25 guys working for me. And then another 5 years or so went by and they had another opening for, they call it, that was a foreman job. And I put in for that and I got it. And then I had about 100 people working for me and then it just kept going. And then I got into, they built a new plant out there in Tempe, And then my boss said, I want you to go over and take over the engineering and all of the maintenance of the area and everything. So then I became a manager. Then I had 175 people under me. And gray hairs coming out. Man, it was lots of problems. But then I stayed there for, 5, 6, 7 years and got boring and decided to retire.
Okay,
Hey, Gene, if you're taking a transition, I want to
certainly.
pause for a second.
We'll go ahead and pause for a minute.
For all over the country.
And so when they came home, they sold it for more than they paid for it. So it was really, really neat at the time.
Are we good?
Whenever you're ready.
Okay. So, so you started out kind of doing the plumbing job,
Yeah,
basically. And did you say who it was that you were working for at the time?
that was our research.
Air Research, but prior to Air Research, who
Uh,
was the man that you were
Oh,
working for?
I worked for a fellow by the name of Ed Dawsey. The Carl Dawsey he's talking about was his youngest or his brother, not his youngest, but his brother. After that piping we got done in there, and then I went to work for him and worked for him for a good while. And they wanted me to come over to Honeywell, but he paid more money than they did, so I wouldn't go over there. Then finally I decided, well, there's no future here, so I went over there and stayed the rest of my working life.
Okay. Then Air Research was located in Phoenix?
Yeah, it's right beside the airport on Airlane Way. That's what it's called, but it's the south part of the plant is right up against the fence of the airport.
Okay, of Sky Harbor?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. All right, let's talk a little bit about how you got interested in becoming a volunteer firefighter. How was it that you decided to get involved with doing that, with being a volunteer firefighter for Chandler?
Well, my boss at the time was on the city council, and they needed some firemen. At the time, they was short, some of the older guys, and they needed some young blood in there. And Ed, my boss, he just said, hey, why don't you go ahead and join that? And so he actually, I worked for him, but I was in town, and he furnished me a truck to drive all the time, so he knew I would be able to get to the fire. So he basically was the one that caused me to get on there.
Was this Ed Dawsey you're talking about?
Hmm.
Okay. Now, what year was that you started?
Let's see, I retired in '76 and I had 26 years on there, so use your,
So that would be 19. started in 1950?
Yeah, no, it wouldn't have been 50. Well, yeah, it probably was. Because I was still in the fire department when I went to work in Phoenix. But at the time, for all the years that we were there, for years was the old siren, you know, in downtown there that blast off, tell you where they go. And then finally we got radios, and I was the captain of volunteers, and they gave me a radio, and I had to put up my headboard, and that thing waked me up, and I'd have to go to fight fires, and then I had to go to work next morning, and it on and on, and it got to the point where it was just too dang much, so I finally quit.
Wow. So in 1950, what was the fire department like at that time when you started in 1950?
Was like we had an old Dodge, about 35 Dodge our fire truck, and that's all we had besides probably 20 guys. I don't remember how many guys there was, but it wasn't too many.
How many of them were paid?
How many's what?
How many were actually paid?
There was no paid department. It wasn't paid until, I don't know, a lot of years later. Finally, they got a chief, and he got paid. And then later on, Bill Allen, he was the captain. He got paid. Well, they didn't get paid very much, but George Knight was the chief, and that was the only one that got paid till a long time down the road.
Okay. So when you started in 1950, you think there were about 20 volunteer firefighters at that time?
At the most, that many. I don't know if there was even that many or not.
Okay. Do you remember who any of them were?
Well, of course, there was Bill Allen was one, and there was, you talked to Fred Renfro, did you say you talked to?
I saw an interview that was done with him.
Oh, okay, he was on there. Let's see. Bud Jennings was on there. He's still here. And who was the old man that had the Ford, the garage up there? You know, on the north side of town. Anyway, looking at their faces, I could tell you, but just remembering them back.
We can look back at that picture later.
Yeah, you can see that.
Okay. Do you think that this is one of the questions that we're curious about? Did you, becoming a volunteer firefighter, did you have a certain standing in the community because you were a volunteer firefighter?
Yeah, they kind of looked up to you to be, somebody that was helping out and keeping the city safe. So yeah, I think I really enjoyed the thing anyway. Enjoyed being a fireman, and yeah, I think so. I think they thought it was great that you were a fireman.
So when you started in 1950, how did you get your training?
Got the training through George Knight. No, it wasn't George Knight at the time. It was, what the heck was that guy's name? There was, before George Knight, there was a guy that was the chief. He wasn't paid or anything, but then we'd trained once a month. We'd go down the old 35.
Preston Odom?
Yeah, that was the guy.
O-M?
Preston Hodem. Yeah, he was the chief of the first one that I worked under. And none of them really knew that much about fighting fires, but we learned a little.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, I want you to describe for me a little bit more, kind of what it was like to be in the fire department at that time as a volunteer. So, at that time, what was the kind of gear that you had? For example, what was the kind of equipment that you had access to? That kind of thing.
We didn't have equipment. We went to the fires and whatever we had on. We didn't have anything. finally we got some old helmets, and after a long while we got coats, but we didn't have any breathing apparatuses or nothing like that, and we just went to the fire and whatever clothes you had on, and that's the way you fought the fire.
What kind of equipment did you have to fight the fire?
Just what we had was that 35 Ford fire truck. That's all we had. Well, then later we got the 46 Ford, and it was a little more modern, but the old 35 was, well, that's still down there. You know, they completely rebuilt it, and I guess it's sitting in a cage now, right?
Yeah, it's in like a,
Well, I used to drive that thing quite often, because I'd be in town and I'd be first one down there, and then I'd grab that thing and start heading out.
okay, so what would have been, what would the equipment that you would have had, like that would have come on the truck? I mean, if you think about today, firefighting is so different and they have so many things, you know, in terms of equipment on their trucks that they have. What kind of equipment did you have to work with back in 1950?
Like I say, we didn't have any equipment other than what we had, the old fire truck, and then a lot of the fires that we had to go to was no fire. There was a big canal that ran through Chandler down through there, and we'd go and pump water out of that. And as for the equipment, we just didn't have any.
I guess what I'm asking is, what would have been on the truck itself? Like, it was the hose and like what would have been on the
Oh,
truck?
well, yeah, well, you'd have the breathing apparatuses, and you'd have all kinds of, your clothing would be there, and your helmet, and all that sort of gloves, and all that sort of thing, which we didn't have any of.
Okay, so when you were going to a fire, for example, back at that time, you would take the truck over to the canal and pump the water out of the canal?
Yeah, if there wasn't a fire hydrant there, well, that's what we'd do, pump it out of the canal, suck it out, and then it come up, and then we had a 500-gallon tank on the thing, which we could, if it wasn't real bad, then we'd run out of water, well, we'd just run out, but
So there were fire hydrants that were located in Chandler at the time when you started?
not very many.
Do you remember?
No,
where
if
they
we're
were?
remembering where in the heck they were, no, I can't.
So it was just a handful around
Yeah,
the town? Because the town wasn't very big at that time.
not very big at all.
So if you were gonna go out to the farms, for example, out past the city limits, you would have to probably pump it from the canal.
Yep,
Okay. So that seems like a lot of work to do
it
that.
was that.
Yeah. Okay. Can you describe for me, since maybe many people don't know what it was like to be a volunteer firefighter back at that time, but how is it that you would get notified that something was happening? How did you know where to go? That kind of thing. Like, describe that process.
There at the fire station, there was, about 35 feet, I guess it was, pole, and on the top of that, there was a siren. And next door to the north of the fire station was a jeweler, and they'd call in to him, and he would go out, and it'd say, for instance, that the fire was over on the northwest side of the town. Well, he'd blow it 2 times, continuously 2 times, and the firemen would know to go over there in that area. And then if you wanted to go the other way, you'd got so many, and then downtown was 6 times. So that's how we found out how to get where we were going, because we didn't have radios. No, we didn't get radios till later. So at first there, that's the only way we knew where to go. You know, you could see smoke coming, you knew approximately where it was because Chandler wasn't very big, and it's over there. So then you'd go till you see the smoke and head over there, and then you'd find it, and that's how you found where the fire was.
Now, was there one or two people that were responsible for getting the truck, or was it whoever got to the station first?
Whoever got to the station first could drive the truck. And the other guys, they did in their vehicles would get over there and on. But most of the time, the guys, when they start blowing it, they'd be close enough, they'd be down and, lots of times when I drove the thing, being close by, there'd be 2 or 3 guys hanging off the back of the thing. And then the rest of the time, well, I mean, the guys would, whoever, if somebody got there and there was nobody else on there, they'd jump on the old Dodge and take off.
Now, what would happen if you were working when the fire alarm went off? Could you leave your job and go take care of that?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's one thing that Ed told me when he got me to join it. He said, I said, well, if I'm busy, he said, that's okay. You go ahead and do it, and then you can come back to work, which I did.
Okay. And you're talking about, I think you were referring to Mr. Novak,
Yeah,
who was the jeweler.
yeah, he's a little guy. But
Now, when he got that call, was it just somebody, a citizen that would call him, or who would actually contact him to?
the
go-
citizen, just a citizen would call him.
So he was almost like the dispatcher in a way?
Yeah, I guess that's what you could call him. And he used to blow the thing at lunchtime every day, 'cause he kept the exact minute to the exact time, and he'd go down at 12 noon and he'd blow the whistle. And then he was, like you say, a dispatcher, because he'd go out there and blow the thing for wherever it was. Somebody call in and say, we're over in north so-and-so, and he'd crank it off.
Was that the only location, the only siren?
Yeah, that's the only one. I think it's still there. I was talking to Jim a while back, and he said that thing's still over there.
And the station was located where back in 1950?
Oh, Arizona Avenue and that little street that goes,
Was it Chicago?
yeah, I think it'd be Chicago.
Is that by the city hall in that same area?
Well, the new city hall type.
The one that was there in 1950, I think, was there on Chicago Street too.
Oh, yeah. Pretty close.
Okay. Now, you said eventually you got a radio, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember when that was, when they came in with the radios?
Oh, long time. I'd been on there a long time, and being a captain, and he wanted me to be at the fire. Well, that's when I got a radio of my own. All the guys didn't have radios. I just had one because I needed to be there, and so I kept it out, like I said, at my headboard, or had it with me all the time. But then I was working in Phoenix. Well, then I was on night call. So they didn't call me at day, just at night.
So that you had at home, and if a call came in, you were on.
Yeah,
that night.
from the time I got home, I think I was on duty from, 5 o'clock until the next morning, till I had to be to work at 7. So I was on call all that time.
So you could have